Holy shit, under 2 hours. Look at us.
Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello and welcome to episode 70 of Mythos Busters. That's 7 with a 0 behind it. That's a lot of these, guys. I'm Sean, and joining me tonight are my friends Nick. Hey, Nick.
Hello.
Can you believe it's 70?
It is, it's at once believable and also unbelievable because it's kind of like, yeah, that like we're not higher than that yet. But then I go back and look at like the list of previous episodes and I'm like, oh, no, there actually are like 70 individual episodes and it's crazy to think
lots of extra stuff and YouTube videos and it's weird to think that we've been doing this for almost we're on 3 years now, right?
I believe so.
Oof. Crazy to me. Also joining us tonight is Ian. Hey, Ian.
Hello.
How are you?
I am functional.
How does 70 sit with you?
70, I'm kind of in the same boat as Nick that it feels like we should be like in the 100-something range, but it is also a very substantial amount of episodes. And being on other podcasts in the past, this is the most episodes I've ever done of a show, so...
Ooh, well,
yeah.
Congratulations.
I know.
Also, let's not forget that each individual episode is itself a lot of episode.
If you measure in total hours of content, then yeah,
it's a thing. Absent tonight, unfortunately, is Scott. He had a conflict, though. I think he's hosting some kind of crazy fun gaming thing right now, so he's fine. And tonight we've got a fun episode for you guys. So we've got some patron updates to run through. We've got some juicy news to pick through. And our main topic tonight, we're going to talk to a developer of the game, a designer and developer who works on this game about a new scenario who came out. And we'll introduce him when the time comes for that topic. And then, of course, we'll round it out with some tentacle time. You know what? I'm going to assume we have some patron questions from last episode that we did patron questions to get back to, and I'm going to see how many episodes it takes us for me to go, you know what? At the end of the episode, we'll get to them before we actually get to them.
We have a shot.
We have a shot. We might knock a few out. Yeah. But of course, we'll round the whole thing out with some tentacle time. So, guys, before we hop into any of that, how's your Arkham been going lately? Nick, what you been playing?
I haven't... Oh, no, I did. I started a multiplayer... I was going to say, I haven't played Arkham.
I was about to say, hang on, you just talked about this the other day.
But yeah, I did. I started a multiplayer campaign. I built 4 decks. I invited 3 friends over, and we were going to play Return to the Night of the Zealot with the standalones built in there. Unfortunately, only one of the invitees could make it, and he had to bring his son over. So his son and my son played together, but of course they're 3 and 4, so it was a loud family area with a lot of interruptions. So we only made it through...
I bet that was a very uninterrupted game.
Right, yeah, we only made it through Return to the Gathering, but that's still a fun twist on that original scenario, and even though he's played that scenario before, it's been long enough, and he hasn't seen the changes, that it was all pretty new to him.
Was that Evan?
Yes, it was Evan, yeah.
Excellent.
I played Joe Diamond, he played Control Jim, and then I had Tony and a Carolyn deck that went unclaimed. So my hopes are that next time...
Weeping quietly in the corner.
Yeah. My hopes are... Well, he chose Jim first, and I was like, well, I don't want to do Tony if he's doing Jim. I better do someone who can do a lot of cluing. So I grabbed Joe. Because I played Carolyn a lot. Anyway, I hope that we can get the other 2 people over so that we can actually turn it into the intended 4-player format. It's nice to have a camp... I don't want to say regular because it's been 1 session so far. But it's nice to have a campaign going that's multiplayer since Laura hasn't been playing as much often because her work schedule's been really crazy and she hasn't felt like sitting down to play games at night. So she's been sitting those out, sadly. So my 2-player games have been me doing two-handed... which is fine, but it's never as fun as having someone else there, so...
There's Look, I am a huge proponent of two-handed. It is my favorite way to play the game. But there is some inherent sadness to it, too.
That's interesting that your favorite way to play is with two investigators, but just you. Because I would say my favorite way, I think I like 3-player the best. I think to me that's like.
Oh, sorry, I meant my favorite solo. I should clarify.
Okay, that's
like,
very different.
Legit multiplayer is the best way to play the game.
Yes,
that's important.
I was like, that's an interesting thing for you to reveal on the podcast, Sean. But no, it was fun. Look forward to continuing that campaign. But that was all that I played. Is just that one scenario. And I'm reticent to dismantle the decks to then start another campaign on my own, because I built those decks with the intent to have a regular game night going, so that I wouldn't have to dismantle them. So but you know,
admitting defeat.
The age-old issue of Arkham that I've had pretty much since the first cycle is I want to build a deck and leave it built. So anyway.
Yeah, that's a pretty big hurdle for Arkham specifically, just the way I find it works.
Agreed.
Excellent. Funny you should say that. I have 3 campaigns going on right now, and I'm running a new TCU campaign because for some reason, just when TCU was in the middle of releasing, I kind of got off my normal cadence, so I haven't played it as much as I normally would have a campaign that's been completed this long. And I took in a token control Jim and Joe.
Oh, nice.
So when you said that, I was like, oh, God, what are the odds? They're not great at this point. There's a ton of investigators. When you say token control, Jim, are you talking more like sealing mechanics? Because I did like token manipulation, like Olive and Ritual Candles, and
no, I didn't do Ritual Candles, but it was definitely Olive, Dark Prophecy, and then Wither and Sixth Sense, and all the cards that trigger off of. And it was so fun to watch, because I didn't guide him too much, because Evan's a card game veteran. He figures his stuff out pretty quick.
Combo decks too.
Yeah, so it was so fun to watch him, like, watch the cogs fit into place and to start turning for him, because he's like, oh, then I can do this, and then he's like, what happens if I Olive, and then I Dark Prophecy, and then I Premonition? It's like, what happens if I do, and he's like nesting all the effects together, and I was over there just like, that looks so fun. What is my hunch this turn? Oh, it's working a hunch. That's fun. Like, I mean, Joe's
standing
fine.
outside of your own party.
Yeah, exactly. Joe's fine, but Jim is definitely the kind of investigator that I get really excited for. Is that janky, just having abilities trigger off of abilities. Yeah, it's amazing.
Hey, remember when people said Jim was boring?
He was like when he came out, he was, because he didn't have any tools. He had Song of the Dead, and that's crap.
Oh, man. Hey, remember when people played Song of the Dead?
I played it. It's terrible.
I know. Well, played. Past tense.
Exactly.
So in my other campaigns that I have going on, I have a... actually, I was up with a friend that I hadn't seen in a long time, and this is another friend that I played card games past with. We were hanging out for a gaming day. I convinced him to, somehow, I still am not quite sure how it happened, I convinced him to run an Iron Man of Return to the Night of the Zealot. And we fit in, which standalone did we do? We did Excelsior.
Yay!
We fit in Excelsior, and it was a really good time. I let him play Luke, which, like, all of this seems so improbable. Yes, a new player. Sure, let's play Iron Man. Oh, hey, like, yeah, had me probably the most mind-bendy investigator that's ever been invented. But he did fine with it. God, that was a really fun campaign. So, very rare that I get to do that again. And I still think, bold but true, Return to Night of the Zealot is the biggest improvement on the original campaign.
For the campaign as a whole, I haven't played. Yes. I haven't touched Return to Carcosa yet, so I don't even know what that is. What is different with that one? Dunwich was fine. Like Dunwich, I think it's more of a scenario by scenario basis. Some scenarios really, like Essex is the new Essex is really fun. Yep. It still has some of the same issues, but the stuff that's added helps elevate it so much.
Agreed.
But the new Blood on the Altar, that one doesn't stand out. Like, I can't remember barely anything about what changed in that. So, but yeah, I think Zealot is a pretty solid one. I have no idea what's different in Devourer because I still lose that one super quick.
We managed to get there before the big U even showed up. We were coming in with decent decks.
Nice.
Also, turns out Luke kind of makes some scenarios really ridiculously easy.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
He does.
A scenario like Devourer, especially when it's got that choke point.
Yeah. So I was playing. Who was I playing? It was some Guardian. Was it Tommy? Why can't I remember? No, it was Zoe. I was playing Zoe. I was playing Zoe. And I had Dynamite Blast in my deck specifically for the cultists. So the thing opens up. He shortcuts through, like, gets into the gate. It's just like, yeah. Anyway, I still use my Dynamite Blast, and it was amazing. But Luke breaks things, and he's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then my last campaign that I'm currently running is another Return to the Night of the Zealot. I didn't know I'd be running two so close to each other. But the Globetrotters won.
Yep.
So now we've got through, let's see here. We did Excelsior, we did Blob, we did Rougarou. I think we're going to go to Egypt next. Because for hitting them all, like, Carnival is kind of the one where you can just kind of get screwed the easiest, right? And just die. Am I right on that?
I mean, I guess the one I always put off is Guardians of the Abyss.
Yeah,
Okay.
me too.
But Carnival does have, like, that one can take a left turn pretty quick as well.
So yeah, then that's what I'm running right now. Ian, what you got going on?
I feel like I did start one new set of G-Meter campaigns, but I feel like a lot of what I've been doing since Arkham Knights is trying out a lot of decks, like a standalone. I think just because we got these new interesting investigators, like I tried Luke against Carnival and some other scenarios. I ran solo Patrice through Return to Night of the Zealot. Speaking of Return to Night of the Zealot, just because I wanted to get that baseline sense of, like, how good is solo Patrice? And yeah, she won Devour Below with the stopping the ritual ending and not the killing Big U. So she did pretty well. Got 3 of the cultists in Midnight Mass, even though the return version can be rough with, like, how it bumps up the health of the cultists, so it's hard to get their doom off the board. But even with that, she did pretty well. So yeah, Patrice is strong solo. Like,
Man, I think
just
I
that
think
flexibility.
Solo Patrice has got to be like number 1 on my to-do list at this point.
Yeah,
She's good.
It's
Do you find you run solo more red or decent amount of purple?
I think it's a healthy balance. Maybe a little more red, but it's pretty balanced. But I think the thing with Patrice is I just always have this healthy sense of, like, safety that, okay, like, I'm gonna have some way of dealing with whatever comes at me, whether it's even just chucking icons at an evade test or pushing resources into Fire Axe or something. Like, I think just that consistency that the stuff is going to come up eventually, and you're going to have some kind of answer for whatever's there. Like, yeah.
So you should slide me that list.
Okay.
But question, who's your ally in that build?
I'm looking at it right now. I think I started with Peter, and then I added Miss Doyle.
Okay, yeah. Well, Miss Doyle, I think, is a no-brainer for Patrice. I've been getting good use out of Renfield, but then again, I guess that build is a little bit more purple.
Yeah, he's in my campaign, my Patrice that I'm running through Dream Eaters. He's there. So when I was running this, I was like, okay, let me try out a different ally and see how that goes.
It's going to be a while before someone convinces me that Renfield and 2 Stray Cat is not the best level 0 loadout for Patrice.
Yeah,
Changed my mind.
Yeah, I have Stray Cat in there as well, just for that weakness management.
And when you're running Renfield too, it's a great Renfield stopper.
Yeah, like, it's nice that she's able to just kind of toggle those allies back and forth because they're just gonna keep coming up.
Oh God! Okay, God. Now, I guess I'm playing Patrice now. Thanks, everyone.
You're welcome.
Disassemble the current campaign I have going.
Wow.
And then I started.
Like Nick got like vicarious anxiety there.
Just the thought of breaking down decks. And then the other newest thing is I started a Return to Carcosa campaign. And speaking of bad control Jim, I also have bad control Jim involved. I don't know, there's something in the air.
Yeah, it's called Sixth Sense and Wither.
Yeah. In my case, I paired him with a... I've been playing a lot of Jenny lately, like, because it's been a while since I integrated some new cards, so... I was initially motivated because I used her in a standalone play of Excelsior, and then I was like, okay, let me try this out on campaign, and it's kind of a weird hybrid because I was at Gen Con, I was experimenting with the big money Jenny where she sits on like the Smaug build, just sitting on a pile of resources. Which is fun, but I don't know if I really enjoy those builds that much because, like, I like spending my resources and I don't like just sitting on them that much.
Ian, so let me sell you on this real quick.
Okay.
Attorney Urkel.
Sure. I think that was in my Gen Con build, I think, actually, but I don't know if I played
it was because I also run Charles Ross Esquire in some of my 4-player Carolyn builds, and I remember when you brought him up, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually playing him like an ally I never expected to play. Is now like I include him only in 4-player, but yeah.
So this new Jenny is still piling up the resources, but now I'm tiling it risky Jenny, so I'm doing like a succeed by 2 build and then funneling all the resources into high roller, and then I'm also using lucky dice, which I haven't used in a long time, which is what I used to pull off the victory in Excelsior actually. So
nice.
Yeah, and then I in the standalone build I brought in God, what's her face, Ellie, to help grab relics because lucky dice is a relic. So I'm not convinced it's a great build yet. I need to tweak it more, but
sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing with someone like Jenny. Like, she's so versatile that even though, like, the optimal build for Jenny has kind of already been established, like, you can still deviate from that pretty hard and find success with her and still have a fun build because she is so versatile. Like, that's awesome.
Like, and the amount of resources she's able to pile up is obscene now. Like, I'm in the 2 games so far, she's generally like getting around like 15 to 19 easily
nice.
In a few turns in. So it's really finding the optimal build of like, okay, I've got obscene resources, like I need to have enough stuff for her to spend it on at this point. Otherwise, like, there's no point to having it.
Right.
Excellent. Well, let's move it on then. So we've got a couple of Patreon announcements, so everyone bear with us while we kind of run through some changes that we've made to our patrons. Patreon. I always get those. They're not interchangeable, though.
No.
I think when we started the Patreon, we kind of thought, like, oh, this will be kind of fun. People will throw in. But we've gotten just so much more engagement and interest shown in what we're doing, and I just continue to be humbled and staggered by it. So thank you to everyone who has pledged and continues to enable us to do ambitious things that we probably wouldn't have gotten around to had we not had someone going, yeah, here, we'll give you money for it. So we wanted to come at kind of this stage 2 of Patreon with a little bit more intent than I think we had the first time around, because again, we just didn't expect the response we got. So we've got a couple changes to the current Patreon setup. So the first thing that I think is the most important thing that is not actually Patreon specific is that we have our merch store live. It is open and it is a thing, and you can go see our pretty faces pimping our own gear. So this is at mythosmerch.com. We've got several items out there. Guys' favorites. I mean, I'm going to go hoodie because I'm a basic bitch, but
the hoodie is great. I really like the baseball shirt is cool. I still got to get my hands on a beanie because I love beanies.
Oh, you don't mean a toque?
No, I'm not calling it that.
Thank you. I don't think we ever properly ganged back up on Scott for correcting us every time we said beanie.
Fool of a toque.
So anyway, that is out there. Go check it out. we kind of went through decent pains to try to make sure that what's out there is quality. The shirts are really nice fabrics. We tried to get good logos on good colors. So go ahead and check that out. If you have any questions or comments on what's out there, or suggestions on things you'd like to see, it's pretty easy for us to set a lot of things up. So if there's interest, we'll definitely put it out there. So that's at, again, mythosmerch.com. So change number 2 is that there's going to be some patron exclusive merch that will be available on the merch store as well. So the merch that is out there is available to everyone, regardless of whether you're a patron. But we wanted to do something a little bit special for our patrons because they, again, allowed us to set all this stuff up. So there's going to be 2 levels that will become available once this merch gets unlocked at the $500 goal. So level 1 will be available to anyone who's at a middle manager tier and above, and then level 2 will be available to the chief officers of waiting tier and to all board members, which we'll cover in just a quick sec. Ian, you want to cover number 3?
So number 3, we added and altered our patron goals a bit. So this is like the special stuff we unlock when we get to certain total levels of support. Like in the past when we got to, was it 200 for the musical episode, I think?
Yep.
And 400 was the merch store, etc. So now what we have going is at 500, as Sean mentioned, we're going to have the Patreon exclusive store items unlocked. At 550, one of the Mythos Busters hosts will get a tattoo, some kind of Arkham Mythos Busters Cthulhu related tattoo, and we'll find a way to document it with pictures somehow.
Probably video too, if I know us.
It'll be a thing. At 600, we will design a new standalone scenario like we did with our Consternation on the Constellation scenario. And at 666, an auspicious number, we will host our very own Mythos Busters mini convention.
BusterCon!
Yes, time and location to be determined. But yeah, BusterCon will be a reality at that point. So if you're interested in any of those goals, then yeah, we'd appreciate your support in getting there. Kicking down a buck or two gets us closer to many of those assorted goals.
When we first put the tattoo thing on there, it was the thing of like, we'll never ever even get close to reaching that. But as we eke closer and closer, instead of dreading it, I'm kind of coming around to the idea. I've got some thoughts, so hopefully we get there. Yeah. So otherwise, I'll just have to get it and pay for it myself.
Yeah, Network 57 in chat is saying, "When's the rap battle episode?" I don't think you would want to hear that.
Don't give Scott any more ideas.
Yes, I know.
Yes, because as our musical episode showed, Ian's the only one with any rap skill for lyric writing.
Oh, man.
Okay, so then change number 4 to the Patreon. We've got a new tier that we're adding in. So we had I know we've mentioned it before, we had a lot of interest in being on the board. Way more than we ever expected. And again, thank you as always to our board. So we've kind of tried to figure out something in between that still keeps the board special, but still gives people who would be interested in that kind of a lot of what is available there. So we've got a new tier, the Chief Officers of Waiting. So basically it's going to get the same as all the tiers below it, plus any swag from events that we make. The caveat here is that the patrons would pay shipping. Access to any of the Patreon exclusive merch at the store. You're going to get a bonus off of merch at the store. And then first priority if someone falls off the board of directors and a seat opens up there. And then change number 5 is just update to perks on the board, so board members check your email if you haven't already. All right, Ian, regular patron stuff.
Yeah, as always, thanks to our illustrious board members, Chris B, Chris H, and Chris U, our conglomeration of Chris's, Cyclos, Alex, Ian, Kyle, Philip, Dave, Abilio, Nathan, Chad, and Robert. And it was nice to meet some of you in person at Arkham Nights for the first time.
Yeah.
Special shout out to a random patron this time around is Mark Zine. Thank you, Mark, for supporting us. We have a couple new job titles, which we will be revealing soon, probably next time around. And the final note is that Dissonant Voices are a project where we are recording kind of our voice over versions of the campaign log text. That project is underway for the Dream Eaters, so hopefully sometime soon we will be releasing that for the Dream Eater, so you'll be able to just put that on and listen to one of us reading that campaign log text in a dramatic / humorous / scary /
what? No, it's me. Don't make promises.
I'm sure it'll be great.
I actually have all the audio recorded. I just need to go in and edit it. So I'm hoping that we'll have the first edition of that up in the next couple of weeks. So remember, anyone who's subscribed to our Patreon at any level will have access to that. We're hoping it'll just be a fun tool to just throw on a YouTube video in the background, or we'll make these available in audio files too, to just have it playing while you're setting up the game, and then you don't have to bother reading through the story text every time. It'll just be a nice hands-off experience. So if that's something you're interested in, you're not a patron yet, consider it, maybe.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning we wanted to focus on getting Dream Eaters out first, because that's the current cycle, and so it's the one people are going to be focused on, but we will have the other ones coming after that.
Yep, it's not going to be like the Miskatonic AV Club, where we say we're going to get caught up, and we almost get caught up, and then we fall behind again. This is going to be, there's going to be good maintenance here once we get it going. So then that's everything for Patreon. So if you missed any of that, or want to see, if you're just a reading learner, there's a big blog post on our website that it contains all those changes and new announcements, so go check that out if you'd like to do so. Okay, guys, let's move to community stuff. Nick?
Yeah, this is pretty brief, but this last Sunday, October 27th, Nathan Early out in Oregon, where was this in? Portland, Oregon, at Guardian Games, they held the Arkham Horror Beneath the Waves 2019 event, and he sent me some pics and some just, like, recap stuff on Facebook. Sounds like it was a lot of fun. I know that we sent him some extra stuff to give away at that event, including some extra copies of Consternation on the Constellation, and stuff like that. So he said that our scenario was responsible for selling a good number of raffle tickets because people really wanted that scenario. I think we gave him 3 copies to give away. Yeah. I'll share some of the pictures in Discord here as we're talking, as we continue with our discussion. But yeah, I didn't get a total head count, but he did say that Constellation and Excelsior were the 2 big scenarios that were being played, other than, I think there was a blob, like a pretty large blob event going on. And they had some really cool custom horror and sanity, like, certificates. Like, if you get killed or you go insane, they have some of these really official looking certificates that I'm going to share here real quick.
Nice.
That were really fun to see. So yeah, awesome to see a big event like that get put on entirely by members of the community. And I'm glad that we were able to provide some consternations for them to give out. So those are in the hands of a few more people.
And a couple scenarios too, am I right? Thank you for that pity laugh.
Sorry, I'm going through the pictures looking for ones to post. So,
all right, excellent. Well, that sounds fun. God, that one's close. I hope they do that again. I might be able to make it out there some year. News, Ian. We've got some.
Yeah, we did get some news. A couple of Mythos packs announced with some player card spoilers. The first one is Dark Side of the Moon, which I have been told perfectly syncs with the Pink Floyd album if you start playing it at the same time.
Check is on the grass.
This is the third Mythos pack of the cycle, and this is scenario 3A of the Dream Quest campaign, which I continually get this mixed up, but this is the dreaming side of the equation. So as usual, we don't.
What, really?
Yes. We don't delve too much into the mechanics, but this does sound really interesting because it seems like it's kind of like a stealth quest where there's some kind of like alarm system that you can alarm level that you can alert the baddies to your presence more and more by doing certain things, and that has my interest because I love that kind of thing in video games. Or, well, I don't always love it. Sometimes video games do stealth levels badly, but that's a whole other thing. But
It's true. I've seen it.
Yeah, but in board game and card games, I always feel like it's an interesting decision to, an interesting challenge rather, to represent that. So I'm excited to see it happen. So as mentioned, though, we did get some player card reveals. So let's have Nick read this one since he missed his chance to read the Guardian card reveal on Twitch. This one is Lucid Dreaming.
Oh, sure. All right. Lucid Dreaming is a 2-experience neutral event. It costs 1 resource. It has the spell trait, so it's our first neutral spell, right?
Aside from signatures, I believe that to be correct.
Cool. Well, I would argue those aren't neutral, but they're the exact opposite of neutral. They're as far from neutral as you can get. But anyway,
I refuse to touch that argument.
And its game text reads: choose a card in your play area or reveal a card in your hand. Search your deck for another copy of that card. Shuffle your and draw it. Shuffle your deck. That's great. Like a 2-experience, 1-cost tutor is amazing. I think the thing that's keeping this from being absolutely phenomenal is the fact that it costs you an action, which I would gladly pay an action to search my deck for a card. And
also bear in mind, it's a tutor for a card you've already found.
Sure, but how many times, like, there's this, I think yeah, that's true. I suppose you probably wouldn't run this in every deck, but, like, it's going to be good to get, like, bomb skills, or, like, if you're running a deck like Endless Flamethrower, and you want to make sure that you have, stuff to stack tokens and everything like that. This is something to ensure that you're able to continue your combo, rather than set up a combo.
It's also good for myriad cards, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, definitely good for, like, Open Gate or the Segment of Onyx. Just any of those cards where it matters how many you have.
I'm trying to think what else. Like, I suppose this isn't bad in, like, a Mystic who's relying on charge-based spells. Like, oh, my Shriveling's about to run out. Let's go grab another one.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't know that I would take this for that purpose, but...
Yeah, I'm trying to think of... I know when this was first revealed, there was a few things that jumped to mind that are now not in my mind. I'm trying to remember.
Since jumped out.
They've since jumped out and not returned. Yeah, any kind of key events, I think, that you're relying upon, not so much assets. You could, like, if you have signatures that are multiple, like, say, Tony's Guns, that could work for that, right?
Yeah, that would be good.
Because he gets that, like, you can play the one for free if you play one, but it's hard to get both in your hand at the same time, so that could work. Or Safina's Painted World, you can grab a second Painted World from your deck.
This is also great. I know Sean mentioned myriad cards, but this is also great for Easy Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so many times when you have Easy Mark and you play it, and you're like, I wish I had another one.
Yeah.
If you've thrown down an Open Gate, that's not in your play area anymore, is it?
No.
Damn.
Yeah, you would have to hold on to it, I guess, to get both.
For one action.
Yeah. You could grab both Delve 2 Deeps.
Oh, now you're talking my language. Except shamefully, I have to admit that I haven't run Delve Too Deep for like 2 years.
I was surprised that between the 4 of us in Iron Man, there wasn't a single Delve Too Deep.
Campaigns just have enough experience now. There's just enough. Dunwich was so sparse that we just felt the need to run it. Yeah, I don't know. I was sad to see it kind of leave the zeitgeist a little bit too, but
I don't know if sad's the right word. More like I took note of it.
I noticed.
Yeah.
I mean, would this be worthwhile to get multiple cancels? Say you have one ward, you have one deny 5, and you grab another?
I would never look bad at someone if they use this to pull their second premonition.
Sure. That's because premonition is fantastic.
That's just, yeah, it's like the best card in the pool right now.
Here's the problem I have with this one. It is cool that it's like, hey, this is a copy of any other card from your hand or your play area. But that's really good early to mid game. I think less so late game. And this has no icons. That's a problem. Right?
True.
Yeah, that does, the no icons does force you to, like, that makes you consider this harder as far as, like, not auto-including it. Like, you stop and consider, like, will I get use out of this in my deck? Because if not, then don't run it, because I can't even commit it. Unless you're running corner. But then, like, I don't know, Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. If you're running cornered, then that entire argument goes out the window.
Yeah, or in a corner.
Yes.
I hate you.
I can do this all day.
Thank you for that geometry joke.
I think there's specific builds that this would be fantastic in, but it's not just like, let me throw it in anything and it'll do work for me. That was, unless I'm mistaken, the only player card spoiler in this pack. There was...
Oh shit! You know what I just realized? Mandy can grab 2 copies of that card.
Yes, which
Yeah,
which usually
for,
would
like,
only be a thing for Myriad, right? Because
Right.
That really only lets you pick, like, that's like 5% of the card pool right now.
I think it's maybe like 2 cards that Mandy can take.
But definitely for the segment of Onyx build, which I was experimenting with for my standalone of like, you grab the segment and you, and that brings out the freaking special item that I can't remember the name of, but the pendant, is it?
Yeah.
Pennant,
yeah,
something of the Queen.
And then you try to include stuff to add charges to it or secrets or whatever it takes, and then you keep doing that. But yeah, this would be a nice component to make that happen faster. Reckless of the Queen, or Pendant of the Queen. Okay,
That's the one.
Yep. Okay, so that's about it for Dark Side of the Moon. There was like a weakness spoiled, but it's kind of part of the scenario, so we will leave that there. The other Mythos pack announced was just recently was Point of No Return. And on the cover of that pack, some people are speculating this is Roland's sister or Roland's alternate universe incarnation or something. So this is scenario 3B of the Web of Dreams campaign, which is the waking side of the equation. And so this is following the investigators as they find a way into the Dreamland. I guess eventually the 2 campaigns are going to meet up, presumably. So the player card in this pack is a green one, so I'm going to read it. There's also a red one. The green one is Daredevil. This is a level 2 skill with 1 wild icon. It is fortune and practiced traded. After you commit Daredevil to a skill test, reveal cards from the top of your deck until you reveal a rogue skill you can commit to this test. Commit it, shuffle each other revealed card back into your deck.
Wow. So the thing with rogue skills is that, I don't want to say all of them, but a not insignificant portion of them are ones that you kind of want to commit under certain circumstances. Am I wrong?
Well, a few of them for sure. Quite a few of them rely on succeeding by a certain amount, like quick thinking, watch this. What am I forgetting?
And then there's like Cheap Shot or Hatchet Man that only work under certain... Although, never mind, this is that you can commit, so it would just skip past those anyway if you're doing a test that doesn't have the valid...
Sure.
Never mind, this card's amazing.
Yeah, so you're really the kind of luck factor is which one it's going to hit upon first.
Right.
So,
So
say you were really hoping to grab that, watch this, and it hits, like, quick thinking instead, but that's not the end of the world. You're still getting something good.
Yeah. It's a good thing it specifies rogue skill.
Yes. Yeah.
I'd imagine this would be busted if it was just any skill.
Just any skill at all. I feel like this is something that kind of really helps with a card that I have not yet touched, which is all in for rogues, which is the one that if it's successful, you draw one card for each point you succeed by to a maximum of 5, which is a super bomb draw effect, but it's a 5 XP card.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you're only buying 1 for the campaign, because if you're buying 2, that's 10 XP, which is,
Yeah.
that's a lot. So this is kind of something that might help you get that all in out quicker, so you're not wasting the 5 XP.
So, oh God, I'm sad that this says specifically rogue skill, because like my brain immediately went to other things. Yeah. So I mean, your top targets for this are, I mean, most of the time probably going to be level 0, right? Like, yeah, you can get to the point where all in will start doing some work for you, but that's mid to late campaign. Sure. So what, you want this on quick thinking? Watch
Quick
this.
thinking would be great.
Hatchet Man probably for those that are running.
Well, that only hits 1 test.
True.
Well, here's the thing. Do you commit this when you're, like, meeting the difficulty, or when you're, like, under the difficulty, in the hopes that you then, it pushes you over? Or do you commit this when you're already over, in the hopes that you get a card that will then trigger some sort of succeed effect? Because I'm leaning towards the latter. I think you only use this when you're in a good spot, and you're like, well, if only I had watched this, well, maybe I can pull it.
Yeah, I think generally, because it's a 2 XP card, you're like wanting to make sure you get the most bang for your buck.
Yeah.
I am honestly not sure how I feel about this one. Is the most honest thing I can say. Like, the Rogue seems always so choked for, not necessarily choked for XP, but there's so much good stuff in the leveled up versions that it looks like, oh, it's just 2 XP, but finding that 2 XP when that could be something more meaningful is going to be tough. So I think I just need to think about it more, like what's... And it might depend on if we get some more bomb rogue skills in the cycle.
I think you run... See, I think when I read this card, I think if you're running this, and then the only other rogue skill you're running is the one that you want to be triggering. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
Like, that's... Because that's... Or maybe you have 2. Like, maybe you have quick thinking and watch this, or quick thinking and leveled up opportunist, or something like that. Leveled up opportunist would actually be good, because then you're actually adding a card to your hand if you succeed. But I don't think that this is like... Oh, it's not like you're doing... I don't know, it's not like it's stroke of luck or something where you just throw it into any deck and it's equally useful,
No, I think you definitely have to be kind of intentional about how you build the deck and when you use this. Like, grabbing the double or nothing for a big test or something.
Oh, man. But that's the thing, like, I guess if you're building for double or nothing, then you already have skill boosts in mind other than skills. But, like, if you just happen to pull your double or nothing when you're hoping for watch this, and then you're like, oh shit, now the shroud is like 9 or whatever. Well, you can't double up to 9, but you know what I mean, like 10 or something.
I think that's why you have to be kind of, when you're playing, thinking through those scenarios of, okay, what skills are left on my deck and what can I potentially hit with this?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
It seems really fun. The artwork is great. And I just think it's a more narrow use than First Blush would have you believe.
Yeah, I think it's just bound to be a card that gets better over time as we get more rogue skills, specifically like key rogue skills. But I do think rogues is a class that has some of the best skill cards, so I think in that respect has some good options there. Okay, the next one, player card was a Survivor card. This is a Glimmer of Hope, and why don't you read this one, Nick?
Okay, Glimmer of Hope is a level 0 Survivor event. It costs 1 resource, has 1 wild icon. It is has the Blessed trait and the Fortune trait. It is a Myriad card, so we're getting 3 copies. And its game text reads, a Glimmer of Hope can only be played from your discard pile. Add all copies of a Glimmer of Hope in your discard pile to your hand, including this copy. That's really cool.
I had to read this one a few times to figure out what I was doing.
So all right. So you play it just to pull it back into your hand. That's all it does.
Yeah.
But it gives you a wild icon.
Yeah. So you're committing it for the wild, and then playing it from your discard to get all of them back to your hand.
Yeah. This is a Patrice card, far and away.
Sure.
This is, I mean, I want to say it's a Mateo card just because it's blessed.
Yeah.
And Mateo doesn't have a lot of tools
hype.
right now. So, but really this is, I mean, anybody, the only downside is that, like, it's Myriad, so you kind of, like, you're not going to run one of these. And if you're running 2, you're going to find space for the third one. And 3 cards is not easy in a 30-card deck. Like, it's not easy to take a deck and go, what do I take out to get all 3 copies of? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even though this is the kind of effect that a lot of investigators could use, I think because it's Myriad and because of the desire, and it could just be a psychological thing, because of the desire to get, all 3 of them, that's going to maybe artificially narrow who takes it.
Yeah, it's definitely like just having access to those wilds is useful, but just already building with Myriad cards, like you mentioned, and finding space for 3 copies of cards feels so tough sometimes. It really throws off my deck building calculations, but obviously for Patrice, but I think it's a tough one. Like, of course it's going to be useful, and it's all about the opportunity cost of, like, what are you leaving out to include this?
Right, and that's the biggest restriction, I think, in this game, is the card space. More so than experience, more so than class. The 30 cards is very hard to play around. However, at the same time, I can't wait for us to get 10 Myriad cards, so I can just build a deck of 10 cards that are 3 copies each.
Nick, you realize the deck space is less of an issue if you don't tie yourself to 2 copies of every card,
I'm not
right?
I'm sorry that I go for the efficient play.
Well, I'm just saying, it's
And I usually have like 4 1-ofs in an average deck. I usually have like 4 1-ofs. But I do prioritize, because when I go to cut, the first thing I go to cut is like, all right, my 1-ofs, what do I not need? Because the odds of me finding them are literally half of the odds of me finding my 2-ofs. So, I mean, that's how probability works. So,
I understand. I'm just pointing out.
Because let's see. So really the trick is getting all 3 copies out into your discard, and then basically you could pay 1 each turn to get, like, say, an equivalent of like a 3 wild icon skill or something.
Yeah. Oh, it's not fast. I just realized it's not fast.
No.
Like, that's
so you're giving up an action as well.
Right. You could totally, because that's the thing, is like, once they're in your discard, you're just in cycle heaven. Like, then it's just go ham on it. Like, pull them all back, commit them all to a test, the very next action, pull them all back next turn, that sort of thing. The only downside is that, it takes that action.
Yeah.
So. I like it. I love the design of it. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and Mateo hype.
So I had to step away for a minute. You guys mentioned Min, right?
No, we haven't mentioned Min yet.
Oh, this is so good for Min. This is so good for Min, because every one of these is individually an unexpected courage.
Yeah, freaking Min. Yeah, that's right.
Freaking Min.
Freaking Min.
I wish...
Min is so unassuming, though.
Yeah.
Like,
I wish this card existed in a class that I played more often. because I play Survivor so rarely.
What non-survivors take
Min.
this? Do you think
Just
Agnes
said
looks
min.
at this?
Well,
obviously,
I don't
obviously
think.
Min.
I mean, Agnes could. Like, it wouldn't be a bad include, but I think there are more efficient ways to get those skill boosts in Agnes.
Yeah.
I find my Agnes builds
Yeah,
to
I
be
think I would
pretty
tend to
tight.
agree.
Like, it's so hard to find space
Yeah.
for anything else.
Yeah. Even at level 0, Mystic has a lot of great tools for a few different archetypes. So yeah. Who else can pull?
Preston doesn't bother with this because one wild icon is not going to make much difference. He needs something more substantial or something that presses a different resource, like resources.
Sure.
Well,
Just because of where he's starting from, yeah.
Yeah. Tommy probably doesn't. Well, Tommy has resources to spare, but you're probably doing ally play with Tommy, which means you probably have skill boosts from your allies to some degree. I don't know. Who else takes Survivor off?
Any of the Dunwich Gators could potentially grab.
Oh, right. Ye old Dunwich Splash now has to account for myriad cards. God, and
Yeah.
Matt, I don't envy you for the Dunwich
Except for
Splash.
Rex, I guess, because it's fortune traded.
Yeah, he can't take it. Yeah, I don't.
That's actually probably a really
Yes.
good thing, if we're being honest with ourselves. I know in the post-taboo world, Rex is not that big a thing, but yeah, pushing to 2 more easily, recurring. Yeah, anyway. Y'all know how that works. All right. Excellent. So, let's, I guess, turn to our actual topic for the night, right? Because that's all the news
Yep.
we had.
Yes.
Okay. So let's get to the patron questions that we didn't get to last time. First one is from Joe Barlow. Could Nick tell us a little bit more about what it was like to go through the development process with Matt and Fantasy Flight on Murder at the Excelsior Hotel? What surprised him about the process?
It was the worst process ever. Matt is incredibly difficult to work with, and I'm just happy I got paid. No, that is the exact opposite. It was phenomenal.
Everyone in FFG marketing that's listening to this is clutching their pearls right now.
Blood pressure rising.
Sorry, Brooke.
No, it was phenomenal. Matt and I, like, we already talk a lot anyway. So, like, working on this with him just, like, doubled the number of Discord messages and Facebook messages and emails and all that we would normally send. And he and I, like, the communication was so natural and so easy. It was so casual, other than, like, signing the NDA and stuff like that. And as far as what surprised me the most about the process, I don't think there was anything too surprising about it, really. I guess maybe how willing and how, not willing, but how much trust there was from not only Matt, but from FFG in general on a lot of the crazy ideas that I had for this. Me, someone who doesn't have a whole lot of freelance game design to my name. Like, this is the first thing that I've designed, other than...
Yeah, but you've got a lot to your credit. Well, hang on. That's exactly the opposite of what you're going for.
Yeah, like...
You've done a lot of it.
When Matt came to me and asked if I wanted to design a scenario, I said, yeah. And then he said, okay, pitch me something and we'll talk about it. And this was what I pitched. This was the first idea I had, was for Murder. But much like building a deck for Arkham, the card space was the hardest thing. Like, keeping it at 78 cards was difficult. Especially with it.
Despite that being one of the fatter packs for Mythos
There was
cards.
so much that I wanted to do with it. And that's like that was probably the most surprising, was just how open everyone was to the ideas that I had, and to, like, all the trust that was put into it, to going, like, like, you'll make it work, like, you can do this, this sounds great, like, you're into it, so we're into it. Like, I expected a lot more, like, well, no, let's change this. And not to say that FFG is like that, but just because I've never really worked with a company as big and as influential in the tabletop market as FFG is. So I assume there was more that they would want to do on the creative side of it. And other than Matt kind of steering me every so often, or rather, he was more like, occasionally he would put up the bumpers in bowling, like he would keep me on the lane.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I imagine that normally someone else at FFG is putting the bumpers up on
Very
Matt.
well could be it, I guess. I'm not sure. But yeah, it was a very, very enjoyable experience. And it's, I loved it.
So you say it was your first idea. Where did that idea come from?
It came from, surprising I'm sure nobody, tabletop RPGs. So I listened to,
On brand.
I listened to a number of RPG podcasts, and one of them, and one of them is really, really big into like Call of Cthulhu and Eclipse Phase and these heavier kind of wilder RPGs. Call of Cthulhu not so much for wild, but it's out there, like as far as the concept or the material that it covers, because it covers everything Lovecraft. And on one of those podcasts, the hosts were talking about a one-shot that they ran, and one of them said the best advice for like when to start your story is to start it at the last. Ian, I just read your message. I'm sorry. The best moment to start your story is the latest possible moment that you can. So like as far into the action as you can. So having very little setup, like don't have a slow lead in, really hook people from the beginning. And then they had talked about one shot that they wanted to run where there was a murder that was committed, but the players were the ones who committed it, and they had to come up with why or how or whatever. And that was basically the one shot, was them dealing with it. And I was like, that's amazing. And then...
also, I suppose... We're really bad at this. Probably spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't played Excelsior.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
The title it's tagged in the title. People know what they're getting into.
Exactly. We haven't gotten any deeper than the insert text for the intro
or the announcement
so
article.
You can still pull out if you need to.
So so I took that and I ran with it, and I obviously made it my own. Now with Arkham, there's I just loved that idea so much that it's like, here's this pivotal, dramatic moment that we're just saying already happened, and now it's up to you to deal with the fallout of that. And the myriad of, to use an apropos word, the myriad of consequences that could befall an event like that, especially in a game like Arkham, are just so exciting. And it was difficult to, cause I'm going to ramble, and I apologize for that. But yeah, so it was inspired by, a podcast that I listened to, and just from tabletop RPGs in general, and the freedom that you have there, and basically my desire to see if Arkham could handle the same level of freedom.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think this is true of any storytelling, whether you're doing like a book or a movie, and this game is a form of storytelling too. But just thinking about like where you start a scenario. Because I know even when we were working on Consternation on the Constellation, there was the initial thing of like, okay, like, because you could start that scenario like before the cultists take over. Like maybe Act Agenda 1 is like having a nice time on the boat, and then the cultists take over. But it's much more interesting to start like, okay, you're captured, now get out. And yeah, I think that makes Excelsior more engaging, that it starts with, like, here you are, there's blood everywhere, have fun.
So then I suppose that leads into... So why did you decide to keep the structure of this thing so simplistic? Did you not want to take any chances at your first design opportunity? Or something complicated and crazy?
For a minute, I was like, wait a minute, you're going to have to define what you mean by simplistic, because I'm not following you at all. No, yeah.
No, I'm just being an ass.
I like to push boundaries. I like to really challenge, mainly myself. Like, it's not so much to challenge, like, Matt's ability to not go insane at everything that I'm coming up with,
Sure.
or, to challenge the limits and the boundaries of Arkham. It's more to challenge myself and to be like, am I capable, of taking this idea and executing it and realizing it in a way that meets my expectations. Like, I always try and push especially, like, RPGs are another thing, too. That's why geez, like half the time we play RPGs, I'm inventing a new system for the RPG. It's just, yeah, that's just part of who I am.
I've learned so many goddamn systems for RPGs.
So yeah, I like to constantly push myself and constantly put a puzzle in front of myself that I don't even know if I can solve it or not, and then just try my damnedest to solve it.
So you wanted all these different outcomes to be possible. What did you use to rein yourself in? Like, how did you decide on the clutch that ended up getting decided on? Matt?
I don't. Well, here's the thing. Like, he reined me in to a degree, but I've also learned how to rein myself in over the years. I'm not 22 anymore, you know what I mean? Like, I've learned kind of, I can identify when I'm going off the rails a bit better. And sometimes I like to just let the excitement take me, and sometimes I like to go, okay, no, like, I'm losing focus here. But as far as, like, what I landed on, I knew that, again, with 78 cards, I knew I only had so many cards to use. And I wanted to have, like, my two big tenets for this scenario were replayability and turning a murder mystery on its head. Now, we already talked about that second one, but the replayability part, I knew that I would have to come up with ways that this scenario would continue to be interesting every time you play it. And to me, that meant that the murder was different every time. Like, that was where my brain went. Like, that's obviously the way to make it the most interesting, is to make the murder play out differently every single time.
Like Clue.
Yeah, kinda.
That movie with...
Yes,
with
yeah, with the 3 different endings. Yeah, that movie's funny. And that was another thing, too. Like, my favorite Lord of the Rings scenario is Murder the Prancing Pony.
Yeah.
Surprising nobody, I'm sure.
That's a good one.
It's a great one. I love it. And that one, the murder is different every time, in much like with Clue, where you have a different, like, there's a list of suspects that you have to go through and all that. But I wasn't doing that. I wasn't doing suspects. We knew who committed the murder. It's you. So that put a different, like, pressure on coming up with a number of alternatives that still fit the narrative. And so I kind of had to land on a number, and 5 is a good round number. 5's like a good go-to for me as far as, like, number of options, because it's not too many, but it's enough to, like, when you get done, if you only got to choose, for example, 2 of the 5, then you're like, oh man, like, what are the other combinations? So yeah.
I think one of the most interesting parts of this scenario for me, and one of the things that makes me like it a lot, is the fact that so much of it is based around managing enemies in a way other than killing them. I mean, you can kill them, but there are punishments for it. But there's, like, a ton of parlay tests on enemies to deal with them, because some of them are just innocent hotel guests, or there's the police, the Arkham officers that come in. Like, there's just a ton of it seems like a lot of the scenario, at least the initial first couple of acts and agendas, are based around, like, how can you stop these annoying enemies that are piling up doom in a way other than killing them, or if you do kill them, like, you kind of have to consider how you're going to do that and the repercussions. So, like, was that something you knew from the get-go? Was that, like, a conscious choice from the beginning, or is that something you kind of stumbled into along the way?
I guess I decided pretty early on that it was going to be at a hotel. And I thought that, to me, like, the hotel, again, going with what's the most interesting iteration of this, or what's the most interesting version of this, with a hotel would be when it's busy, when there are people there.
Right.
And so then my brain just immediately went to, like, how do these people, how would they react to knowing a murder took place? And so that's where we get the nosy guests from. I can't remember what they're called now. Are they nosy guests? And then, like, Arkham officers and stuff like that. And it's funny that, like, I thought about this later. I really didn't honestly think about it until, I think, after the scenario released, but I identify as a guardian. Guardians kill enemies. Yes. And the scenario I designed is one in which you're discouraged to kill probably over half of the enemies in the scenario.
Most.
Yeah.
Hotel guest is
Just hotel
is
guest. Okay, yeah.
what it ended up as.
Yeah, so so I was really interested to because that's another thing too is Arkham, the card game, has made me it's brought out this level of excitement from me in being in the most mundane of places. I think Clover Club was the first. House Always Wins was the first one that really did that, where it's so these guys.
You're Nick. You'd be bored by a bar.
Where it's there's these guys aren't going to attack me as long as I don't, give them cause for it. And then obviously everything flips on its head, and then you have to deal with them. But Clover Club was so cool because of that. And then The Last King in Carcosa, where you're at a dinner party.
Yeah.
And now there's obviously other layers and other things going on in Carcosa because it's fucking Carcosa. But that whole idea, I have to learn how to, and then to talk about really briefly the custom campaign that a number of us were doing. One of the scenarios pitched was around a theater and putting on a play. And while that one seemed a little out of left field, it still was really exciting to me. How would that look? How would putting on a play in Arkham Horror the card game look? So I love taking things that we recognize, that we relate with, things that are pretty mundane and everyday, and then trying to emulate those as best as possible via game mechanics. And that's where the Hotel Guest and the Arkham Officer came from. And I'm very happy with how it turned out, because I think it hit those notes. In my opinion, it hit them pretty well.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. It's actually one of the reasons I think, thinking about it now, why Arkham Horror has become my favorite game, because so many games, especially card games, is just about whack things and kill them and just destroy them. And that's part of the reason why I'm attracted to Rogue, I think, and Evasion Gators, is because figuring out how to manage enemies in a different way. But the Arkham system through Parlay and through Evasion and all this just provides so many different ways of managing enemies other than just killing them. And yeah, I think Excelsior really exemplifies that. And I also agree, kind of the mundane set, the out of this world surreal scenarios or environments are cool too, but for me the horror really hits, and there's nothing more horrifying than weird stuff being brought into everyday settings, I think.
Right.
Or the damn teeth on the hotel menu. God, every time I see that in that art.
I'm
sorry, Nick, I know you had next to nothing to do with the art.
I mean, I wrote the art piece for
that
it.
one.
I described what the art
Oh,
was
you
going to
did?
be.
Okay.
And
cool.
when I described the hotel manager as being an amorphous blob of eyes and teeth and mouths, I pictured fangs,
Right.
threatening.
Not lines of molars and bicuspids.
Not molars. That's the most unsettling thing about it. And I love that art so much because it's so better than what I had in my head.
That's great. Also, big shout out to the Dimensional Shambler. I'm really glad that E.T. had time to go to the weight room and get swole.
I think the other thing too that you kind of focusing in on these non-traditional enemy management does is it leads to so many stories. Just from hearing people play at Arkham Knights and in the Discord, people have so many funny stories, because I think it just leads to entertaining moments, like someone rolling dynamite into a restaurant full of Arkham officers, or I had a funny moment in my recent standalone where Jenny was the murderer with the murder weapon, and she's like, "I did it, do it." Drops the murder weapon and pulls out a Time Worn brand, a huge sword instead, and proceeds to just murder all the hotel staff. So, but I think this is a game that really is all about not just the story and the text, but the stories that people can generate through playing. And right. I think this particular setting of the hotel and all that, the guests, and it just leads to so many stories.
All right, so I guess kind of returning to another part, what made you pick? So as you were talking about earlier, we start with the murder mystery, and in the Mythos that can go in any number of directions. Did you have a specific way you picked kind of which leads and which ultimate enemies that went to?
I wanted a variety, first and foremost. I wanted 5 that felt really unique and individual, and things that would interact with, like, they would change the way you interact with the scenario differently between the 2 that you get. And I didn't even know if it was going to be 2 originally. Like, I was still working that out, but I knew that I wanted each one to have their own identity. And so part of me was like, part of it was that, and part of it was I wanted to use some elements of the Mythos that maybe we haven't seen in the Arkham Horror card game yet, or maybe haven't seen that often. Like, I think we've had one Shogoth so far, and that was in Dunwich, and it just kind of shows up. Like, it's not really part of the plot at all, or part of the story. And I love Shogoths. They're one of my favorite enemies. So I made sure that one of the boss enemies was a Shogoth. Also, the Dimensional Shambler, I guess in my head, and I could be very wrong, it may just be how I came into Call of Cthulhu and the Mythos in general, but to me the Dimensional Shambler has always kind of been like the beholder of Arkham, like it's or of Lovecraft stuff. Like in a lot of the Arkham stuff and a lot of the RPG stuff, the Shambler is kind of like one of the flagship monsters, and we haven't seen it yet in the card game. So I thought it'd be cool to include it in this scenario and be someone who's like determining how that looks and how it interacts and everything like that. And then beyond that, I mean, like, you need your cultists, and you need, I wanted to do an alien of some sort, and I thought the Migo would fit perfectly because they love to fiddle and they love to meddle with lower species and stuff like that. And then the 5th one originally, and I was trying to remember what it originally was, because the 5th one wasn't always a ghost story. That was something that Matt proposed maybe like a third or halfway through the development of the scenario, and I'm so glad that he did, because it injects a new not a new layer, but it's a new angle that the previous lead and encounter set didn't really cover. I think it was an alternate cultist one, honestly. It was.
Oh, and the art on those 2 cards came out
I know.
so
The
well.
Ghost, like, everything about the Time Worn Locket set is so fun, and I love the Chilling Presence art of the treachery that's in that set is so great. I love it. But yeah, he's like, you should totally do a ghost story, because we don't have anything like that yet in Excelsior, and he's like, and I love ghosts, and I'm like, sure. And at first I was like, because I've never been big on ghost stories, like, I was like, whatever. But then I made the set and I started playing around with it, and I was like, I'm like, okay, no, this does kind of cover a gap in what Excelsior offered, as far as like an enemy that is harder to interact with via Guardian weapons and stuff like that. And then it presented a whole lot of other options and narrative implications and stuff like that, and a new way to kind of swing the scenario that wasn't just more cultists, so I think that answers the question.
This is something we've talked about a lot on the podcast before, but now you were on the spot actually designing a scenario. But how did you go about balancing kind of the solo versus multiplayer accessibility, especially because traditionally the Arkham standalones have not been very forgiving to like pure solo play?
Well, anyone who's played Winter Winds, any of the scenarios in that, knows that I don't really design backbreaking difficulty. Like, sure. I don't really like that. I think that between standard and hard, like the 2 sides of the reference card, Arkham already offers a lot that you can do with modular difficulty and with changing things up and making things easier or harder for yourself. So, and especially for like something that's meant to be plugged into a campaign, like I didn't really want it to be super difficult. And that's what
Thank you.
right?
Interesting and just novel is always a superior experience to just straight
I would
difficult.
agree. And that's also, and another thing too is that when you're dealing with such a highly variable scenario like Excelsior, I don't know how many times you guys have played it, but difficulty can vary wildly between which act or which final act you get, and what you've built for.
Right.
So I didn't really want to make the lead up to that hard or like super challenging when it could all just be thrown out the window with the final act. And you can't really design, like, it's much harder to balance, quote unquote balance, those final acts, because the combinations are crazy, and then the investigators you bring in, you might bring in investigators that have a good time with Excelsior, and then they just happen to get the final act that's so much harder for them to deal with. So, as far as balancing for solo play, like, already knowing that I didn't want it to be the hardest standalone, that then forced me to kind of go, like, okay, there's still a lot of ground to cover, there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be done, and the board can get flooded with enemies pretty quickly, especially if you're trying to go for, like, keeping innocents alive. So, like, there has to be, at some point, pretty early on in testing, because I at that time, and even still, I play primarily true solo. I was like, there has to be some sort of, not like, you don't have to make it easier for solo players, but you have to, like, I kind of wanted to design for solo players in mind as well. And I didn't want to change a lot, but I wanted to do enough to where it still felt like they could handle the scenario. And I think where that really comes into play, I mean, obviously there's the opening agenda that lasts longer if you're playing true solo, so that you have a better chance of hitting actions and taking care of everything and getting your leads in play before you lose track of that.
Sorry, 2 players.
And I think there was another, I can't remember what the other change was too, but there's another one that specifically calls out solo. And I can't remember what that is now too. But another thing that I thought was really cool, again, and this isn't for solo, but it's more for lead investigator. Like, we do have the different introductions if you're playing solo or if you're playing with multiple characters. But also, like, we haven't seen scenarios split the party right off the bat either. Other than if you're playing Lola in Curtain Call, and I guess in Boundary Beyond you can choose where you start, and people could choose different locations. But that was something that pretty late in the development, I was like, oh, it'd be really cool if just the lead investigator started at the crime scene and everyone else had to work their way to it. Like, so yeah, I definitely, solo was at the, not the front of my mind, but, you know, like, it was like 2 people back in the queue, since I play primarily solo.
Well, I'm sure all those primarily solo players appreciate it. So I guess one of the fun things for me in any standalone is the campaign rewards. So, and I'm quite sure, actually I'm guessing, I'm not quite sure, but it would not surprise me if as a developer that's got to be one of the things you really roll around in your mind a bit. So how did you land on what the rewards were going to be?
So, being totally transparent, I originally didn't have any scenario rewards because I was like, I don't have card space to be designing cards for the players to take.
Get wrecked.
I love as we go through this, the primary problem for Nick is there's not enough cards, there's not enough things.
I couldn't get 79. And so I was like, well, okay. And then probably about 3/4 of the way through, when I was really like hammering down the details and tightening everything up as far as how the leads interacted and everything like that, Matt was like, we were discussing the card pool, the 78 card limit, and things that we could do to get more, because it was like, okay, the encounter deck, like, how can we adjust these so that we can get the optimal quantity of cards where we need them. And we kind of hit this point where he was like, well, what if the murder weapon is a reward? And I was like, I honestly haven't even thought about rewards. That's a good idea. And then we went from there, and then I liked the idea of like, okay, maybe if you're on the good side of the police the whole time, you get an officer. Maybe the sergeant joins you, because he was in the story the whole time. So I was like, yeah, maybe he's actually someone that can join your party. So then I had to redesign his card to make it work if he's an ally, like if he's someone that you actually control versus if he's just a story asset at your location. And when Matt and I were discussing the rework for Sergeant Monroe, I I had an original idea that was like it wasn't great. It was messy, and it was too much text, and it didn't work very well. And then he was like, well, what if it just did something like this? And then I was like, yeah. So he had the idea of like damage, like as he takes damage, stuff gets better. And I was like, okay, how about this? And I talked about the Monroe as it exists now. And then after a moment, I stepped back and looked at it, and I was like, I just made a souped up guard dog. Like, this is just this is guard dog 2.0. Like, can you tell I'm a Guardian player? Because this is amazing.
Guard dog in a human suit.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he's guard dog and Xavier in
Right?
a blender.
Oh, I know.
That's interesting smoothie.
It's a lot of hair. And rosary beads. So yeah, so he was a late finalization, but I'm very happy with how he turned out. And he's something that, like, now when I play, I definitely want to try and get him in my deck every time because I love him.
When we played it in my Nazi Globetrotters campaign, Mark got him, so I'm very excited to see what he does in Mark, because I assume it's going to be good things.
Yeah. And I just want to say that his subtitle, 2 Days Until Retirement, that has existed since the very first incarnation of Excelsior, and I'm so happy it's still there. Because the idea that he's 2 days until retirement, and then you recruit him, and now he's going off with you all around the globe doing all this crazy stuff, and he's still like, God, like, still 2 days from retirement. Like, it's still right around the corner.
Poor guy.
Mark, I'm too old for this shit.
So what do you think was, like, thinking about the whole design process, what do you think was your biggest challenge along the way?
The card pool was a big one.
I was about to say, besides card space.
The number of cards was a big one. Forcing myself to... I think my biggest challenge, and this is where Matt really stepped in, my biggest challenge was designing a scenario that offered something for every investigator, and still was very much on point as far as theme goes. I don't want to get too much into it, but the scenario is very, like we've already discussed, it's very much alternate enemies. Like, how do you deal with these enemies without just straight up murdering them? And so I was like, I need to give something for Guardians to do. And the original incarnation of that was it was narratively dissonant from what the scenario was setting up and what it was delivering. And so Matt was a big part of, like, working with me and with that concern that I had of not giving the monster killer monsters to kill, and kind of like making it, still providing that, but making it fit more with the theme of the scenario and of like being in a hotel and with this crazy stuff going on. That was my biggest challenge early on. And then once that was done and out of the way, that was probably like a third of the way through the development process. Then from there, it was literally just card pool. Oh no, I shouldn't say it was just card pool, because it was also writing the narrative for the leads to all fit together. Because the way I did that originally was not. I didn't realize I'd have a whole booklet that I could fill in.
Right.
That wasn't made clear to me, or rather, we didn't know that was the case until later on. And then Matt was like, "Oh, by the way, you have a book." I'm like, "What's my word limit? Like, let me know what I can work with," because I was trying to make everything fit on a card, and it was so difficult to do. And that's something I've learned, and luckily, Winter Winds has given me a lot of practice with that. Is like writing flavor text that is meaningful and impactful and still gets the message across, that maybe only fits on 1 or 2 lines of text.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah,
it really is. But luckily, I was able to get, this scenario was provided with a booklet. And so then a lot of that text that I was trying to truncate and trim off the fat and everything like that was able to be full and get the entire message across, and was just moved into that booklet. And so we have that, halfway through the scenario, you read, you do a little bit of a dream sequence, kind of not an actual dream sequence, but like from the Carcosa campaign, where it's like, okay, if this, then that, and follow this, read this, and then proceed to this, then proceed to this, then go back to the scenario.
Right, yeah. I'm so glad that book is there. And allows for that, because you try to fit on cart. And I hope in future standalones that's an option as well, that we see more of that.
Right, and part of me was like, oh no, am I going to have to do story cards? Like, then I have to turn some of these cards, like, I don't have the card space for story cards!
Yeah.
Again, that theme commonly coming up.
Right.
Well, excellent. So, Nick, I have to ask, just in general, looking back on the whole thing, what are you proudest of?
Having it, like, now being able to hold it in my hand and play with it on the table.
Product.
Yeah, seeing other people, like, I think the moment that it really, like, there were two, like, moments when it settled in for me. The first one was getting it, like, at Arkham Knights, picking it up and holding the...
Yeah, that's right, baby, because you had to drop your name.
Holding the package in my hand and being like, wow, like, this is intense. And the other one, the other moment was when we were playing, or we were finishing up our 12-player blob game. And I just saw two other players just sitting off on a table on their own playing it. And I was like, I don't think they know what Mythos Busters is. I don't think they have heard of the podcast or have heard of me. I don't think they have any idea who I am. And they're just...
You're just describing me moving through the world. Like, that's...
But I'm like, there they are, playing this thing that I made and enjoying it. And I was like, and I told Justin and Scott that, and they're like, go talk to them. I'm like, no, I'm not going to talk to them. Like, no, don't be crazy. I'm not going to, like, that would be awkward. And I'd be like, oh, like, what do you think? And so I didn't. But then at one point, as I was packing my stuff up, I overheard Scott talking to them, and he's like, oh, he's right over there. And I'm like, God damn it. Not that I didn't want to meet them. That's not the, like, I don't want to project that image at all. It's just, I have social anxiety.
Scott's on it.
I have a certain level of social anxiety, and that's, like, part of that comes from, like, how do I come across in a way that doesn't sound like I'm like, yeah, by the way, I designed the scenario. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do I conduct myself so I don't sound like an ass, but also don't just, like, trip over my words so much? So I was just like, just avoid it. But anyway, that was pretty cool. As far as regarding the scenario itself, I want, like, I've said it a couple times before, but the Sinister Solution encounter set is my favorite one in the scenario. So that's
the one that's linked to the trapped brain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, being a player who identifies as guardian, the encounter set that has no enemies is my favorite. But when you get that harvested brain as your, like, final act, like, it's such an interesting twist to an enemy heavy scenario. And I'm so happy with how it turned out.
So, fun related story since you brought that one up. When we played through this in our Return to Nazi Globetrotters campaign, I'm playing Agnes in that campaign. And you know how there are games where I just have a treachery and it's just mine? It's my one?
Yes, I'm familiar.
Morbid Awareness was my one in that scenario. And it was one of the few times where that's been, like, fortuitous. Because I'm like, yeah, I'm Agnes. I can take a Willpower 6 test. Let's go. But seriously, I drew that thing like 4 times, and there are 3 copies in the deck. Yeah. Figure that out.
It's so, it's such a fun encounter set. I'm so happy with how that turned out.
Yeah, I do really like that one. Well, excellent. Well, I can't say enough, Nick, as someone who's watched you develop many things. Just to see something you've worked on, like, get out there and get into a community that you're plugged into and care about, and see the accolades that it's getting, because it's all super well deserved. Excelsior is an amazing scenario, and it's one that I'm going to be looking forward to throwing into the odd campaign from time to time, because I can just see myself almost always wanting to play
exactly.
it.
It's definitely.
That's the highest praise possible.
I'll let you know.
I think it's definitely going to be one that I'm going to probably play them maybe the most often on the standalone. And I think, the fact that we talked about how it's not as punishing as some of the other ones.
No, okay, I'm sorry, Ian. You were making a legitimate point, but I have to bring this up. My favorite thing about this releasing is how little Nick gives a shit about how much people hate Noxious. Nick's just like, okay, deal with it. Sorry.
Encounter cards don't normally hit everybody at the location. Well, this one does. Encounter cards normally test a physical and a mental skill. I'm like, well, you know what? This one's agility in combat, so deal with it, fucker. Like, come on.
It's so funny.
I feel like there's always a treachery in a scenario that just ends up being notorious. And that is definitely the one.
I didn't expect that I would be like, not proud of it, but like that I'd wear Noxious Fumes as like a badge. Like it probably is one of the worst designed cards in the set. But I'm still so happy with it because it turned out exactly how, like, I don't think that one changed from when I first wrote it to when it released because it fits exactly what I wanted it to do.
Yeah.
It does what it
Exactly.
says.
And I think it's also in the context of a scenario that's not like smashing you in the face at every opportunity. So
Right.
Yeah, I think it's okay to have a little button that's like dunking everyone's head in the toilet at that moment. Give them a little swirly.
If you're having trouble with Noxious Fumes, try multiplayer. All right, excellent. Well, I'm sure if you're listening at this point, you've already played Excelsior, because why would you be listening to all those spoilers if you hadn't? But let's move it on to a little bit of technical time.
Sure.
Maybe. Ian, what's been grabbing you lately?
Well, a few things, but I feel like all of them are stuff we've talked about on the cast before. But the main things that have grabbed me is I've gotten in deep again with Red Dead Redemption 2. It was sitting there for so long, and it's one of those things where like it's hard to overcome the inertia when like the stopped momentum when you stop playing a game for a while, and you gotta like build your momentum up again. And I got some good momentum going again, and man, I really do love that game. So at some point, me and Sean will be able to talk about it. Some point soon.
Oh man, I want to.
Yes.
No, Ian, you must DM me when you finish the main storyline.
I'm on chapter 6 now. I don't remember.
Okay, so
Yes.
the end is
Like
nigh.
8 chapters.
I don't remember.
No, there's 6 in an epilogue.
Whoa!
Wow!
I really am near the end then. I mean, I kind of got that sense, but yeah. So soon, #soon.
At least that's my memory. I might be wrong. I started a new playthrough because it's been long enough, and oh god, I had to put it down because I'm like, no, there are games I haven't played yet. I can't get sucked back in because Red Dead is just so good.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to both finishing the game because I think it's amazing, and we'll talk more about it when it's all done. But then
And I will dry your tears. I will dry your tears, Ian. Just DM me.
I'm not surprised that there will be tears involved. And then I'm also looking forward to actually having space to play other games since my games queue is long. And then let's see, the other thing is Marvel Champions LCG came out, so I played a few games of that last night, but we already talked about that one on the cast too. But I guess the thoughts now that it's out is I was talking about this a bit before we started recording actually with the people in chat, is that Arkham Horror is firmly ensconced as my number one game, but I think Marvel Champions fills a nice little kind of number 2 slot, and that it's super fast, especially if you play just one-handed solo. Like you can bang out a game like 20-30 minutes no problem.
Nice.
You can get multiple, like 2 or 3 games in a night, so I like that aspect of it, and I think it's just a well-designed game and flows well, so I'm looking forward to playing that for sure. And then the final thing, which I'm sure Nick will probably talk about too, is participating for the first time in National Novel Writing Month, which, if you don't know, is people dedicate their Novembers to writing a certain amount of words per day with the ultimate goal. People, obviously can set your own goal, but kind of the name of the month comes from the idea that you complete some kind of manuscript by the end of the month that could go on to being a novel of some kind. So yeah, this is obviously the beginning of November, so not too far into it. Today is day 2. I gotta do some writing after we podcast here, but yeah, I will update as we go along.
God damn it!
I did it earlier today.
First Nick, then Matt, and now Ian. My favorite part of this whole thing, though, is that you guys are using the new custom Discord status feature to swing around your NaNoWriMo dick size.
Yes.
It's fun to
I want to
watch.
say that's not it, but I can't.
Yeah,
That
Mr.
is
5000.
It's okay. It's all right. There are worse ways to swing it around.
I was originally not planning to participate because as people who have been listening to this podcast for a while know, I've been knee deep in developing my own game for a while, and it just takes up a lot of time. So I was like, I don't have time to do this. Like, I need to keep working on it. But the good thing is, like, I'm at the point in that game design where it's pretty much just playtesting and iterating, and I'm finally happy with the core game design, so I don't think there's going to be any more big changes. So I was like, okay, I can swing it because I'm crazy, and I will do that kind of thing and take on a new project I don't have time for because that's just what I do. But it's also part of like seeing other people I know. There's a little bit of peer pressure going there in a positive way. Because, especially with writing, I'm notorious for never finishing a freaking writing project. Like, I have dozens of stories in all kinds of states, from nearly finished to midway through, from a page in. And so I thought this was a good opportunity to, like... Because I feel personally I respond really well to, like, defined goals of, like, this many words per day. Like, I'm the kind of person...
Right.
Like, if you give me a whole bunch of freedom, just write whatever, I'm probably never going to finish. But if you say I have to hit these goals, then I will hit those goals. So, yeah.
Right.
So you're a normal human being.
I mean, I know plenty of people who don't respond well to that kind of thing. Because if they...
Yeah, but they're freaks.
Sure.
Like, it's a good freak trait to have, if we're being honest. But... most people need some kind of parameter to actually have effectiveness.
So we will see. We'll see what state I'm in by the end of it.
Well, cool. In a couple episodes, we'll have to check back in with y'all to see how it went and see if there's, anything a listener could potentially consume that came of it.
So you can either listen to my thoughts on it or the puddle that used to be me and that puddle's thoughts on it. One of the two.
Well, mine...
I have seen this month break a few people. I've watched it happen.
I was going to say, my NaNoWriMo project will be consumable, hopefully not too long after the turn of the year, simply because I'm using this as the excuse to sit down and actually hardcore work on Part 5 to my Astral Tide series. I was looking, and I was like, oh, should I do... Like, part of me was like, I really want to write a story in Zimmeldron, or I really want to write another horror book.
I want you to write a story in Zimmeldron.
Okay, well, I have the beats written. Like, here's the thing, is, like, I have, like, 8 different books ready to go. Like, I have the beats written out and revised. I know how the stories work. I just have to sit down and fucking write them. But since there's a bigger level of commitment, or rather, obligation to Astral Tides, I prioritized that and made that my NaNoWriMo book. So I'm doing that, and it feels so good. Like, I forgot. That's the thing, is, like, I go in and out of writing. Usually, like, when I'm doing a book, I get about halfway through the book, and that's where my drive really kicks in, and I'm writing every single day, and I forgot how good it feels. Like, how straight up good it feels to write every single day. And also, like, now... It didn't, luckily, because I've done this not so many times, but I've done it a number of times, not NaNoWriMo, but writing books, that I can, like, today I sat down, I'm like, okay, gonna give myself an hour, and I gotta hit my goal in an hour. So that's what I did. I just set an alarm for an hour, and I'm like, all right, my goal is 1,500 words. Let's do this. And I did it. And that level of accomplishment, like, even if Astral Tides weren't ever going to get released, like, even if it was just for me, the process of writing it feels so good and so freeing. And yeah, Ian, you're totally right. And Sean, you're right as well, that, like, oh, it's a normal person thing. But, like, having the parameters and having the goals and having those bumpers up helps so much.
Brought it back
Right.
around. It's a callback, a callback. Everyone loves a callback.
The other thing that I'm going to talk about real quick for technical time, sorry, I just kind of jumped in. So I hope you're done, Ian. I'm sorry.
I love the segue. Why'd you have to call
Well,
attention to
that's
it?
how
That's
I
good.
ruin good things. That's me. I was going to talk about Street Masters Aftershock and the Dark Souls expansions because my board game content or availability exploded over the course of 3 hours in that I got those two Kickstarter rewards, which resulted in hundreds of miniatures and at least 800 cards and boards, and but I don't want to get into that because all I've done is organize. Like, over the course of 3 days, all I've done is organize those things. I haven't actually played much of them. So what I will talk about is the Astral Tides RPG. Since I'm talking about Astral Tides anyway, I'm currently, like, getting it to its second iteration, its second phase. We're going to be doing session 4 of our playtest campaign tomorrow, and I'm really excited for that. And it's, like, how it exists currently, like, in its playtest form, like, what we're playtesting is solid, but what it is kind of, like, turning into with its phase 2 is so much more defined and also so much more interesting. Like, there's a lot more player options, there's a lot more clarity to the rules and everything, and that's what, just playing a few sessions, those things kind of come up where it's like, oh, this doesn't make sense, or like, oh, this could be clearer. And then also, like, game design ideas just pop into your head when you're running a game in a system you've designed. You're like, oh, this should actually be like this, and that's what it's going to be from now on, and that's the decision I just made. So deal with it, players. Stuff like that.
I've been a player.
So I'm really excited for Astral Tides to get to its, like, to fully come into its second phase. And I've had a couple of people who have heard that we're doing this ask about streaming, maybe, and I brought it up to the players, and they all said that they'd be totally fine with that. So I might actually be seriously considering that for future sessions.
Oh, shit.
Not tomorrow for sure. Probably not until phase 2 is ready to go. But maybe I'll revisit it at that point, and I might actually do it. We play every other Sunday night, so that would be when we would stream it, obviously.
Nice.
Matt's character is Matt is playing a particularly interesting character. Super fun. Like, she's great. But yeah, he's like, I don't know if she's proper for public consumption. Well, you said you'd be fine streaming, so if that changes, let me know, and I will seriously, oh, you did. Okay, all right. Well,
dare I ask what makes her so?
I'll just put it this way. And Matt is being very, Matt's being very, like, he's being Matt, but he's a great player. Like, he knows how to approach a wide number of topics, tastefully and appropriately, and so one of the things, like, when you make a character in this, you choose 2 aspects, which are classes. You have a primary and a secondary, and then you choose your bond, and your bond is like your relationship to the setting, to the world. And Matt, for his character, chose the promiscuity bond. And that's just all I'm going to say. So I guess if you want to...
I've yet to hear anything risque.
Well, yeah, exactly. But if you want to see Matt's, I don't want to say promiscuous character in action, because that sends the wrong tone. But if you want to see how that plays out in sessions, then maybe, like I said, we might be streaming that in the future. So
as a player who, I think the social interactions in RPGs are the most interesting piece. Like, I totally get wanting to try that angle. Yeah. It's fine. It's fine.
And we haven't gotten too graphic about it. Like,
no, it's tasteful cutaways. White
Okay,
to-
now I'm
white to
out.
black.
Now I'm out.
Not intentionally, Casey says.
Just you wait.
All right, excellent. Well, if you guys get that together, mention that in Tentacle Time again, or, maybe at the beginning of the show. I'm sure there's a decent amount of crossover of people who listen to Mythos Busters who would also be interested in an RPG live play. So, it's a thing. Cool. Well, for me, I've been playing a lot of Arkham. Haven't had a whole lot of time for other gaming. I'm still working my way through Horizon Zero Dawn. Still continues to be an amazing game that I continue to be like, why didn't this game land this hard the first time I played it? Like, this is an amazing game. It's just kind of weird to have gotten as far as I got my first time that I sat down to play it, and it didn't hook me like it did when I jumped back in. And then I'm also playing Dark Souls 1 Remaster on Switch. I finally have gotten back into that. Beat the Capra Demon, because that guy's a fucker. God. Oh, that room
It's
is the real boss.
death. It is specifically designed to fuck you over. And then
I mean, imagine trying to fight a Shogoth in a closet.
that's essential. Well,
And that's basically
and the
boss
Shogoth
fight.
has 2 dogs.
Yes.
Go on.
God damn.
Yeah.
But I got through it. I beat that mother. I beat him in like 5 goes, which I was very proud of myself in the moment. But then I go, because I try to stay blind on things for the most part with these games until I get through it, and then I'll go and like, okay, what did I miss? What can I do on my next time through? So I go and then look at like what the general internet feel on the Capra Demon is, and it's like, oh, so like I get to keep playing this game where a lot of people didn't.
Yep.
So I was proud of
I'm
that.
not going to give... I might be giving something away, but I'm not going to give a big thing away. But one of my favorite things about Dark Souls is how it takes bosses, and then later on they just become regular enemies. So...
Oh, God damn it.
You
Oh,
have
God
stuff like
damn
that
it.
to look forward to. But here's the thing. Like,
Well,
it's not anytime soon.
Okay.
But yeah, like...
normally, and I know exactly
Yeah.
what you're talking about, and I played Bloodborne several times. I've almost beat Sekiro, so I'm just going to say I've played it. I know what you're talking about. And normally they throw those in when you're kind of ready for them. So, but yes, what's cool about that is then you could be like, oh, here's this dude who just wrecked me for a solid week. And now I'm going to clown on him because that's how far I've progressed both as a player playing the game and, it's an RPG, so your abilities. So, yeah, I actually really like that when they bring it back.
It's really liberating to turn the corner and see, like, 3 of them in a field, and you're like, oh, I fucking got this.
Yep. I know this fight. Anyway, so that's been really fun. On a kind of weird, tangential, slightly philosophical note, I have started to realize that my video gaming life is split into 2 segments. It's before the Souls series and after the Souls series.
Wow.
And that sounds really over dramatic, but I mean it. And okay, so I'm looping this back around. I think that is fully the reason that I love Horizon Zero Dawn more than I did the first time I played it. Because the first time I played it was pre the Souls series, and now I'm post, or I guess I'm in the midst. But just the way those games teach you to accept challenge and struggle in a way that video games haven't really required you to do in a very long time. I realized that I had become a video game consumer who just wanted pablum all the time. Just shove it into my mouth, like occasionally maybe give me a hard boss. Quiet you. But anyway, so even though Dark Souls is really old and really feels kind of clunky at this point, I'm really enjoying that game. So, yeah.
I have a
Okay.
book recommendation for you that I'll get to after the cast because I don't have the name of it immediately. But it's a Dark Souls book that I read before I ever played Dark Souls, and it's really good. Not fiction narrative.
Okay.
It's like analytical. But yeah, I'll toss that your way. Yeah, Casey says you should play Demon Souls. That's
I don't know if I have that level of gumption
it's
yet.
such
but
an
we'll
interesting
see.
game.
I've watched a Let's Play of Demon Souls, so I at least kind of know. I have the temperature taken. And I have it. I own it on PS4. It was on PS Plus at some point. I own it. I could fire it up at any point. We'll see if I ever get there.
I am just I'm just disappointed in
excellent.
myself because I missed the chance to say that I got back on the horse with Red Dead Redemption 2. It's been tormenting me this whole time. It was right there.
Oh.
It was right there. I know.
Oh, Ian.
I know.
Oh, honey. I'm so sorry. It's okay.
Yeah.
It happens to the best of us.
I swear, this is the first time it's ever happened.
All right, well, I think we'll wrap it up here. Guys, check out mythosmerch.com. We're really proud of the stuff we have out there, and hopefully there's something you would enjoy that has our logo on it. Check out the Patreon if you haven't in a while. Like I said, we've got some changes. We just finished a Look What I Found exclusive player card preview that has gone out on our YouTube, so if you haven't seen that yet, go check that out. That's for the Quest for Kadath. And from all of us here at Mythos Busters, thank you for joining us for episode 70, and we'll see you guys next time.